Gigantic elephants in Paris, pyramids in London, or an entire replica of Manhattan in China. These are the most awe-inspiring megaprojects around the world that never came to fruition. Ideas so insane that they never saw the light of day. Just imagine if some of these projects were actually completed. Imagine the cultural impact or the architectural benefits of having such structures in a city. Today, we're going to look at the best abandoned megaprojects around the world. Welcome back to PST Megaprojects. Imagine if there was a giant monument right at the heart of Paris that would rival the Eiffel Tower in greatness. In 1758, a monumental elephant was envisioned by the renowned architect Charles Ribard. The triumphant elephant would have stood tall at the end of the Champs-Élysées, where the Arc de Triomphe now stands. Imagine if the 2018 World Cup winning French national team celebrated their historic win beside the statue. Sadly, though, the design was rejected, and a similar monument, the Elephant of the Bastille, was commissioned by Napoleon in 1808. That project was also abandoned, and a proper structure was never built, only a plaster model, which was later demolished. Moving on to the UK, plans for a 300-foot pyramid were approved for the Trafalgar Square Pyramid in London. The project made it all the way to a public exhibition in 1815. But it would have cost around the equivalent of $142 million today, which obviously canceled all plans. Instead, they cleared the land and built Nelson's Column in its place. The 22-step pyramid would have been a sight to behold in the heart of London. While we're still in the UK, let's look at the amazing Crystal Palace Tower, which also would have been in London. London already had a glass and iron Crystal Palace built in Hyde Park for the Great Exhibition of 1851 and was moved to South London after the exhibition. Before it was relocated, architect Charles Burton proposed an idea that would transform the structure into a 1,000-foot skyscraper, still made of glass and iron. But the technology and infrastructure needed to complete such meticulous structures just didn't exist at the time. If it was completed, though, Crystal Palace would have had something to be proud of. Moving across the world to the United States, we have the Arcade Railway in New York. The project would have been the first subway system to be built in New York, all the way back in 1867. The purpose behind this mega project would have completely transformed the way New York is shaped. Its roads would have been completely replaced with railways and raised canopies for carriages and pedestrians. We can imagine that the canopies would have been modernized as a road for cars and motorbikes, and it truly would have been a sight out of a sci-fi movie. Sadly, the only thing that stood in the way of this project were the opposing business owners, who believed that the idea would harm their business and cause massive declines in sales. And thus, capitalism once again dictated the country and scrapped the idea. It doesn't get any more American than this. Perhaps the most fascinating project in this video is the Coney Island Globe Tower, also in New York. Something about the Big Apple that just brings out the best in every architect. That's exactly what came out of Samuel Freed in 1906 when he published his plans to build a 700-foot tall dome in Coney Island. The Las Vegas-esque building was supposed to hold the world's largest theme park, hotel, casinos, and roller rink. At the time, Freed hoped to raise $1.5 million, which is the equivalent of around $50 million today. A worthy investment if you ask me. Today, a project half as grand as this costs $1 billion to complete. Unfortunately, investors thought that their returns were unrealistic, and it didn't help that the project experienced multiple delays until finally in 1908, the whole project turned out to be a well-planned fraud. The greatest architectural project ever conceived was a lie. Before we depart the Big Apple, let's look at one last entry in New York. Antoni Gaudi's hotel attraction would have rivaled any major city in its architectural prowess if this skyscraper had been completed. Originally designed in 1908, but never discovered until 1956, it is baffling how this amazing design was kept hidden for so long, and more bewildering is the fact that it was never executed. The tower would have stood at 1,180 feet tall and would have been home to a cultural center, hotel, and restaurants. To this day, no one knows why this magnificent structure was never built. Moving on to the Windy City, we now have the Burnham Plan, a plan that would have transformed Chicago into a city more beautiful than Paris. Daniel Burnham's plans hoped to turn the city into a beautiful wonder, with neoclassical buildings, grand piazzas, broad avenues, and expansive parks. The plan was well on its way to being executed, and some aspects were even implemented, but the Great Depression hit, and the vision was quickly forgotten during those harsh times. Moving on to the capital of Washington, D.C., think about how different the Lincoln Memorial would have been. Instead of just being the Lincoln Memorial as you know it, it would have been the Lincoln Memorial Pyramid. In 1911, while the competition to design the famous Washington Memorial to President Abraham Lincoln was still going, the competition was running hot. It all came down to two famed architects, Henry Bacon and John Russell Pope. Several designs were proposed, including a ziggurat, a Mayan temple, a pyramid, and a Greek Doric temple design. In the end, in true American fashion once again, the man named Bacon won the competition, and the memorial took the shape of the Greek temple, the monument that you know today. Next up in Washington is perhaps the most comical project in this entire video. Mother's Memorial was one of many monuments planned for Washington, D.C. in the early 20th century. The story of its rise and demise will surely make you laugh. The memorial was supported by Daisy Calhoun, founder and head of the Women's Universal Alliance, and she even went to court with the designer William Clark Noble, who claimed that she owed him the work. After a month-long trial, the judge dismissed the case, and immediately Noble had a heart attack on the spot. Calhoun tried to bring in other architects and to raise money for the memorial, which would have seen a building standing at almost 300 feet tall and topped with a heroic torch-bearing mother. In the end, though, the plan was never fulfilled, but it did give us the most memorable architectural laugh of all time. Moving over to the west side in San Pedro, California, the West Coast wanted to initiate their very own Statue of Liberty. A plan was made for the Democracy Uniting the World Monument in 1954, which was meant to inspire Asian countries to accept and embrace democracy. This list just keeps getting more American. The structure was endorsed by LA County Supervisor John Anson Ford, but failed to gather funding or garner attention from the general public, and thus it was quickly abandoned. If only it would have happened, and New York would have stopped boasting about the Statue of Liberty. Going into hostile territory in St. Petersburg, Russia, would have been Tatlins Tower. The monument was proposed to the Communist Third International Party, and it would have been made of iron, glass, and steel. It was conceived by Vladimir Tatlin in 1919 to memorialize the Russian Revolution. The 1,300-foot tower would have been on the banks of River Neva in Petrograd, which is modern-day St. Petersburg. Unfortunately, due to a lack of materials, the project was never built. If it had, it would have made the St. Petersburg Cathedral look like a toy in comparison to its sheer size and length. Moving on to the Middle East. In Dubai, the Nile Tower was supposed to be a skyscraper that would stand at 3,300 feet tall, soaring high into the clouds. If it was completed, the Nile Tower would have been the tallest structure on the planet, surpassing Burj Khalifa and all others. It also would have been the first building to rise more than a kilometer. It was originally proposed in 2002 and would have had 200 stories. The skyscraper had an estimated completion date of 2020, but the UAE went through a financial crisis, which destroyed the Dubai real estate market. In 2009, the tower was cancelled. However, this raises questions about why it was never picked back up, especially today, when the UAE is building skyscrapers left and right. If the only issue is the finances, then it should be no problem to revisit those plans. The last entry in this list is probably the only one that has a chance of being built, as it is not yet cancelled. The Sky Mile Tower in Tokyo, Japan's one of the most ambitious megastructures of all time, supposedly standing a mile tall. The plan was conceived in 2016 by the U.S. architecture firm Kohn Pedersen Fox, and the 42-story skyscraper would be eco-friendly. It would feature fantasy ideas from a floating farm that would feed its 55,000 inhabitants to technology that could harvest water from the clouds. You heard that right. Needless to say, we don't think that this building will ever come to life. That is everything for now. What do you think about those abandoned projects, and which one is your favorite? If you could choose one to come to fruition, which one would it be, and why? Please let us know what you think in the comments below, and if you haven't, please subscribe and leave a like for this video. Your support helps us continue our work. Thanks again for your support, and I will see you in the next one.